Hi, the person who just joined with the iPhone name, could you just share who that is? You can come off mute, just like let us know who you are.
It's Tim Hudson.
It's the iPhone that just joined.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Ariane Falk here.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. It's for I'm not sure if it works for like the change of the screen. If you want to give it a try. Like I think I'll have to probably. My guess was that I was going to be able to toggle in here. Not just change the volume, which I think like I was trying to see if like the volume would connect, and it seems like it just comes out here.
You want to put iPhone's name in? You can do that.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
You
Tim
can-
Hudson. No, Judson. Tim Judson. Judson.
Yes, yeah, I see him. Yeah.
That's right. Here I am.
I was
Oh,
just gonna say Dory or whoever it is on the iPhone, you can put her name in, or she could put her name in instead of iPhone. You just go to the list of participants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to confirm it wasn't like somebody trying to like jump like cause like who's going to try and like disrupt in the meeting.
I understand.
For that. Can somebody say something? I just want to see if we might have gotten the speaker to work on this side.
Sure.
Testing one,
Hello,
two,
hello.
three.
Okay, I will just
Testing,
go with the
testing.
laptop speaker then.
Yeah,
Testing,
I'm
testing,
cooking.
testing. Is that coming through?
Sure. Yeah, it's 6 o'clock.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight to learn more about the proposed micronuclear reactor that DigiHost wants to put over on Erie Avenue. If you attended Mayor Tyler's State of the City on Monday, you're aware of all the incredible progress over the past 2 years or so. It's really amazing. It makes us all proud to live in North Tonawanda. Unfortunately, the DigiHost Bitcoin mining operation has created a nuisance in our city that has some residents actually contemplating moving because of the noise and the emissions. Last month, we learned of DigiHost's interest in micronuclear reactors to power their Bitcoin mining operation over on Erie Avenue. Concerned citizens and outside experts think this has the potential to make a bad situation even worse. So we're here tonight, if you want to go to the next slide, to learn about the potential impacts of this proposed micronuclear reactor. I'm not sure if everyone saw in the Buffalo News, they've had a couple great articles lately, including an editorial. But what we're starting to see across the country are Bitcoin companies touting nuclear as their solution to being, quote unquote, environmentally friendly. It's a terrible form of greenwashing, which means companies claiming to take action to improve the environment while not even addressing what created their environmental issues in the first place. Some nuclear experts seem confident that with existing safety regulations and siting requirements, existing ones, a microreactor would never be approved in such a densely populated area over on Erie Avenue in close proximity to residential neighborhoods. However, We're also concerned that existing federal regulations could be significantly reduced under the current Trump administration, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks. These important safeguards could be undermined by lawmakers who are crypto investors, regardless of any conflict of interest with their elected positions. And they need all the energy they can get their hands on to continue these Bitcoin mining operations. It's playing out in communities across the country, and it's the local residents who are raising awareness to put protections in place. Yep. So tonight we're fortunate to have some experts on nuclear energy joining us to share facts and insights based on their experience working in the nuclear industry. I'll give formal introductions when we get to each section, but we have Rick Peterson, who's a North Tonawanda resident and has worked as a technician at a couple different nuclear facilities. On Zoom, we have Diane and Tim from NIRS, the Nuclear Information and Resource Service. They are a wealth of information, and we'll be hearing a lot from them tonight. Hi, guys. And others who are providing information tonight, we've got Bridge Roche from Clean Air Coalition, and Mayor Austin Tyler, who's going to speak later on about the proposed local law to protect residents. I see lots of new faces in the room tonight, so before we get into the nuclear details, we're just going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what's led up to this. So why don't we go to the next slide, and we'll talk about the overview of the current DigiHost issues. So for those of you, who don't know what Bitcoin mining is, it's this process, it's a virtual process for verifying transactions on a Bitcoin, what they call a blockchain. And it involves solving complex mathematical puzzles. And the first one to solve the next block in the chain, if you will, are rewarded with new Bitcoin. It's extremely energy intensive, but it doesn't need to be, as we'll talk about later on. So as you can imagine, this is a fairly new and unregulated industry. And it's our position that because of that, city officials should apply additional scrutiny to decisions like this. Unfortunately, that didn't happen in 2021, if you want to go to the next slide. Not all current council members serving now were on the council in 2021 when DigiHost first approached the city. We also had a different mayor and a different city attorney at that time. But we just want to provide a brief recap, not to point figures, but so that everyone understands what transpired to put us in this situation today, which didn't need to happen if people had done their due diligence. And we just want to be aware of what happened so we can ensure these mistakes aren't repeated down the road. So the proposed DigiHost Bitcoin mining project had safeguards in place, as you'll learn, but this is what happens when those safeguards are ignored. So in July 2021, the council president, who was Bob Pecoraro at the time, he enthusiastically supported this project, even after hearing questions and concerns that were raised by residents and outside experts and people living in communities that already had Bitcoin mining. Austin Tyler, who was on the council at the time, he was the sole voice of reason, and at that point he advocated for a 3-month moratorium. Unfortunately, that got voted down by the council, and that moratorium would, in retrospect, it would have provided enough time for city officials to learn more about this potential project and the industry. Then in August of 2021, the North Tonawanda Planning Commission, and again, there were different people on the Planning Commission at the time, though some of them still remain the same. They declared themselves as lead agency on the DigiHost project, which required a full environmental impact statement based on the potential significant impacts to the environment and the community. However, that didn't happen. Even though other municipalities in New York State experienced issues with Bitcoin, high noise levels, increased emissions, superheated water discharge into local waterways, higher energy bills for residents. These are just some of the potential problems we were hoping to avoid. In addition, several experts in City Hall noted that Bitcoin mining is not an allowable use in our zoning law. Then September 21, there were hundreds of public comments submitted as part of the public hearing. And unfortunately, they weren't taken seriously by the Planning Commission. So in September 2021, the DigiHost project was approved. In February of 2022, DigiHost started testing their Bitcoin mining facilities. And for those of you who haven't been to the facility, they house about 4,000 computers stacked in shipping containers outside of the Fortistar Energy plant on Erie Avenue. And the fans required to cool those are really what's creating the noise issue. So when all that noise started, residents were going, what is happening? What is this irritating noise? I can hear it in my house with my windows shut. It's disrupting my sleep. It's disturbing pets. So we went around with a petition. Over 300 residents signed it, asking the council to address this noise problem. And then in March 2022, so the noise wasn't addressed. We had a few core people attempt to challenge the Planning Commission's decision with a lawsuit. Unfortunately, our lawsuit was dismissed because our attorney missed a filing deadline, so we never got our day in court. So keep going, next slide. So the problems continue. Over the course of over 2 years, residents continued to complain about the noise issue. It's the most apparent issue, but increased emissions, electronic waste, significant water use are other concerns as well. So nothing was getting done by the council. Thankfully, Mayor Tylik was really the main person responding to all these complaints for a project he tried to, eliminate, I'm gonna say eliminate, a project he tried to address at the get-go. So in May of 2024, concerned residents got together, and based on conversations we've been having with communities across the country, we learned what was working and what wasn't. And so we proposed 3 things to the council: a formal noise study, a 2-year moratorium on Bitcoin mining, and then additional scrutiny for data centers. Because what we learned from other communities is a lot of times Bitcoin miners will come in disguised as data centers.
Next slide.
Yep, next slide. So I talked about how noise is the most apparent issue at the Erie Avenue site, but increased emissions are another concern. So Bridge, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about the emissions and what we're seeing.
Yeah, so Fortistar is an older style of power plant. It's specifically for I just want to turn it so people online can see us. It's a peaker plant, which is that's a power plant that's for adding power to the grid, during high demand moments. So like when it's really cold, really hot, things like that, where we're all using a little bit more electricity. Like emissions from this plant have been falling over time because it's been used less and less as other power sources are coming online, like solar, and other renewables. So when this was taken over by DigiHost, you can see it was only about like 3,000 tons of CO2, which that's not great, but that's like a relatively low number. By 2024, it's up to like 146 thousand tons of CO2, and that's closer in line to like when it was like running pretty consistently, like when it was like being like very heavily relied on for power, and that energy isn't being used by any of us. It's being used for Bitcoin mining. So this is creating like issues, not only for the local residents with like air emissions and such, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's also contributing to the climate change. That it is increasing greenhouse gases, and it's one example of like how this whole like data mining industry is exacerbating climate change. We're going to move to the next slide here. So this is a photo that a nearby resident took over the weekend. Over the weekend, we had it was very, very cold. During really cold temperatures like that, you can get like what's called a weather inversion. So basically, it's the way like hot and cold kind of interact. You pour like if you pour like a cup, like some milk into a cup of coffee, you can see this, the way the hot and the cold kind of interact together. What happens here is that cold air, gets, traps the air pollution at the ground level. So you can see visibly the stack, like the emissions coming from the stack right there in the photo. The reason why it's dark and it's light is that's the sunset, but it just like the emissions coming from the stack are very visible when it's like very cold like this. And the number there, that's from a purple air monitor. We have a project to distribute these purple air monitors all throughout Erie and Niagara County, like especially in what are called like disadvantaged communities, like areas that are environmental justice communities. And it recorded a 147 on this chart, which is like the highest this resident had seen. And at 150, that is like, that is dangerous for basically everybody. Like, so it's like the area that it's in right there, it's getting to a point where it's like that's hazardous, that's not safe for anybody to be like breathing it in. And if you are like, I have asthma, so like, when I'm walking around in temperatures like that, or in air emissions like that, it's not healthy. Any of us that have respiratory conditions, you got to be cautious when you're seeing numbers like that. So I think that was my points.
Yeah, thanks. We've got a lot of information to share tonight, so we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So let me get through it. All right, so then in mid-December, DigiHost announced that they were partnering with a company called Nanonuclear, and they have a memorandum of understanding to, as they describe it, advance the transition to carbon-free energy at DigiHost 60 megawatt power plant in upstate New York. So this is what I mean by greenwashing. No mention of increased risks from micronuclear reactor on site. No effort at all to reduce the source of their high energy use, which is basically this proof of work process that they use for verifying transactions. And at the end of the day, changing the source of their energy to nuclear is going to do absolutely nothing to reduce the noise problems that we have. So then we also took a look at this new partner that DigiHost had announced, and lo and behold, we found out that they have a history of issuing materially false and misleading public statements. So you can see it, the Securities Exchange Act and the SEC have taken action on that. Nanonuclear is the subject of a class action securities fraud lawsuit. And let me read just some of the things that they've been doing. Their progress toward regulatory approval for the design of its planned microreactors and fuel fabrication plant was non-existent. Their timelines for commercialization were wildly optimistic at best and most likely impossible. And the foregoing issues were likely to have a material negative impact on the company's projected revenues and growth. As a result, Nano's financial position and their prospects were overstated. And as a result of that, the defendant's public statements were materially false and misleading at all relevant times. So doesn't seem like a great partner, especially when we're talking about a new industry, Bitcoin, and an even newer industry, micronuclear reactors, that don't have regulations in place for that right now. So this next slide here, this is just to illustrate how DigiHost is continuing their wasteful energy practices. Bitcoin companies in general aren't addressing the source of their insatiable energy appetites, namely this proof of work, energy intensive process. If they really cared about the environment and the residents living near their Bitcoin mining operations, DigiHost would convert from proof of work to a more energy efficient option to verify these transactions, such as proof of stake. Proof of stake uses 99.5% less energy, and it also requires fewer computers and then fewer fans to cool those computers, resulting in reduced noise. Another cryptocurrency company called Ethereum successfully converted from proof of work to proof of stake a couple of years ago. So it's a viable option. We've asked DigiHost about it, but they they never answer that inquiry. So instead of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by addressing their huge energy footprint, DigiHost they choose to continue their wasteful energy practices, and they claim to be green by pursuing a nuclear energy option that will create even more risk, and again, doesn't do anything to address the noise problem. So it is true that nuclear generates lower greenhouse gas emissions than the methane gas plant that Bridge was talking about that they use right now. But every energy source has a footprint. So energy efficiency and conservation are important as well, and they're not addressing either of those. As I mentioned earlier, switching to nuclear energy as their energy source doesn't address the noise problems DigiHost has created. Fans are going to still be needed to cool the thousands of computers housed in those stacked shipping containers. These fans are the main source of the high noise levels that have been plaguing residents since February of 2022. Nuclear waste introduces serious new risks that we need to learn more about tonight. And we are very skeptical that a company like DigiHost, who can't manage their noise issues after 3 years and counting, would be able to manage something as complex as nuclear energy on site. So that's why we're here tonight.
There's like a few people loiter.
So next up is Rick Peterson. Now, Rick is a North Tonawanda resident. He's been living here for 43 years. He worked as an instrument and control system technician at the Fitzpatrick Nuclear Power Plant, which is one of New York's 4 large commercial nuclear generating plants, 840 megawatts of electricity. And the reactor is identical to the one used in Japan. So Rick, I will let you take it over and share your insights and your experience on nuclear energy in general.
Everything you never wanted to know about nuclear power. Hopefully. You won't. Okay, the first slide up, you can throw the first slide up just as an overview.
Yeah.
So what is a nuclear reactor? Nuclear reactor is a device that uses nuclear fission to produce heat energy. That heat energy is used to boil water to steam, which is then passed through turbine generators, which convert that heat energy to electrical energy. Uranium is the fuel that's used for the fission process. So what is fission? We'll go on to the fission slide. This is fun. But I can't see. I can't see it.
Okay, we need a little bit more light.
I need a little light. Sorry about that. It's not that interesting anyway. So, what is nuclear fission? Fission is a process on an atomic scale in which uranium atoms are split. When uranium atom is bombarded with a neutron, its nucleus splits or fissions into lighter elements. This releases tremendous amounts of heat energy along with radioactive isotopes and additional neutrons. Those additional neutrons go on to bombard other atoms, causing a chain reaction to occur, which continues unchecked until the neutrons are blocked or absorbed by control devices. We'll go on to the next. Okay. So what is uranium fuel? What does it look like? Well, this is what it looks like here. It's just, it's formed into cylindrical pellets, about 1/2 inch in diameter, 1 inch long. They're loaded into these zirconium tubes, approximately 12 foot tall. The tubes are stacked in up to 12 by 12 arrays. And there are hundreds of them actually, and the big reactors are loaded into a reactor vessel. Okay. Devices called control rods, which absorb and block neutrons, are inserted in between the fuel assemblies to stop the fissioning process. The fuel assemblies do not become highly radioactive until they are installed in the reactor and exposed to the fission process. Yeah, we go back to that one here. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Reactor vessel is basically, the reactor vessel is, I can point to here. This is a reactor vessel, okay? It's basically a large boiler filled with water, covering the fuel. This is where the uranium fuel is put, okay? The best lift dispatcher is 6-inch thick steel, maybe 14 feet in diameter or 40 feet tall. What's a big reactor? Okay? To operate the reactor, the control rods, which are starting out in between the fuel, uranium pellets, are withdrawn to allow the chain reaction to occur and commence the boiling of the water. Okay? Shut down the reactor, the rods are basically just inserted back in, and the kiln, the fissioning process. Okay? Reactor can operate 2 years at full power before refueling, and then only about 1/3 of the fuel is changed. Then, uranium, dry mouth, full water, boils the water to steam, steam passes through the turbine, gets condensed, back in, and recirculated over and over again. Okay, radiation. Everybody hears about radiation. What is radiation? Radiation is energy that's released by the unstable atoms or isotopes that were created by the fission process. It is harmful to human beings. It takes the form of different particles, such as alpha particles, beta electrons, and gamma rays, similar to X-rays. You can't see, feel, smell, or taste radiation. Okay, it can only be detected and measured by specialized instruments. The unstable elements created by the fission process continue to release radiation even after the chain reaction in the reactor is stopped. Different isotopes remain radioactive for varying amounts of times, some hours, some for many, many years. Regulations. Talk about what regulations are in place right now. About the NRC. Okay, the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. All reactors in the U.S. are licensed and regulated by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. The NRC is responsible for approving designs, site location, accident mitigation plans, construction and testing permits, operating licenses, spent fuel handling and storage, and decommissioning plan approvals. They are also responsible for monitoring, site compliance, inspections, enforcements, and investigations. The NRC staffs all commercial plants with its own full-time inspectors to ensure compliance. All plant operators must be trained and licensed, and they must be qualified on a regular basis. And they are also required to have technical advisors on staff around the clock to assist operators in handling unusual events. Again, we talked earlier, we don't know what requirements are going to be for small modular reactors and micro reactors. Right?
That's the big question.
Yes. NRC.gov is their website. And there's a lot of more useful information if anybody is interested. The NRC employs about 3,000 people.
Are they still staffed at this point?
Good question. Yeah.
That is a very good question.
The question was, are they still staffed at this point?
One I can't answer. And it may change tomorrow. Who knows? Yes. Yes. Good point. Okay. Talk about a couple of issues. Spent fuel storage. Okay. Now, what happens to the spent fuel, which is now highly radioactive, right? And will be for hundreds and up to thousands of years, depending upon the isotope. Well, presently, all large commercial reactors in the United States store all of the spent fuel they've ever used at their facilities. Some plants, like Fitzpatrick, have 50 years with spent fuel sitting on site. Initially, it's stored underwater in spent fuel pools. The one at Fitzpatrick is 40 feet wide by 40 feet wide by 40 feet deep. Okay, but they fill up. So after a number of years, some of this fuel is placed into dry casks and still stored on site. Why the on-site storage? There isn't any other place to put it or we'll take it. Okay? And transporting it would be a big safety concern anyway. Okay. Second issue for me, security. Okay? Security at large commercial plants is extreme. Armed guards, perimeter fencing, sensors, cameras, metal detectors, bomb detectors, and TSA type screening for all personnel. Back in 1981, when I left, you can tell a long time ago, there was a force of around 30 to 40 armed guards. Again, we don't know what the security requirements are for these proposed nuclear reactors. Issue number 3, reactor siting. Okay, of concern that Deb talked about earlier, NRC's regulation guide 4.7, which is currently under revision, and the Advanced Act 2024, which may end relaxing current siting regulations for high population density areas. For now, this is the siting requirement taken from RG 4.7. Preferably, a reactor should be located so that the population density averaged over any radial distance out 20 miles is at most 500 persons per square mile. A reactor should not be located at a site where the population density is well in excess of that. So, North Tonawanda, 30,000 people, 10 square miles, 3,000 people per square mile. So, does this mean a reactor can't be sited in North Tonawanda? Not necessarily, because again, we don't know what the current regulations that are under review are going to end up being. Moratoriums. Some states presently already have moratoriums in place for nuclear reactors. In fact, this includes New York, except only on Long Island. The old local. But some other states are rescinding their bans. In fact, Texas and Utah are suing the NRC over the length of the licensing process and claim that microreactors are safe enough that they shouldn't even require any NRC oversight.
Trust us,
Pretty,
right?
that's danger, in my view. Last issue, reactor safety. Not much the same here. Proposed new designs claim to be safer than current ones, but are yet untested. Nanonuclear has only recently announced they just secured patents. Nothing hasn't been built yet, so to me, it's a complete unknown. So basically all I have.
And Rick, I think one of the other things we talked about too was because these microreactors are so small, they're potentially portable, correct?
Yes.
And they could be, so
Yes.
theft.
Security again.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks very much. We'll have, Rick will be available for questions at the end when we open it up for everyone. Next up is Tim Judson. He's joining us on Zoom. He's the Executive Director for Nuclear Information and Resource Service, and they are a wealth of knowledge for us at this point. They're a nonprofit organization, and they've served at this information networking hub for people since 1978. So Tim, I will let you take it away. If there's anything else you'd like to tell us about your background or the organization.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And sorry I couldn't be there in person. I actually live in Syracuse, but I didn't feel like it was good risking the the snow on the thruway.
Tim, just hold on a second. Can folks hear that? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I tried getting it to connect to the connector on there, but it didn't seem to be working. Yeah.
Hang on one second.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Tim, try again.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
A little louder, that would be great.
Testing.
No, it's not connecting at all.
Testing.
Okay. Yeah, so I was afraid of.
And your volume's up all the way?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Like, let me see. I'm gonna try and turn on the captions at least, so we can at least.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. Tim, try that. Try speaking now.
Sure. Can you hear me? Tim Judson, Nuclear Information and Resource Service. Does that work?
We'll just be really quiet. If you can just speak as loud as you can.
Sure, I'll try. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. And sorry that I can't be there in person. I actually live in Syracuse, but I didn't feel like it was good to, to trust the snow on the thruway this week. But I also want to thank Rick for that great overview. And I think, what I'll sort of get into a little bit later is that all the questions that Rick posed are really important questions. There are answers to some of them, and I think in particular with respect to where the safety regulations are. In fact, the regulations on these new technologies like microreactors are actually being cut back quite severely. And so, for instance, the NRC has already approved that there will basically be no emergency planning requirements for these microreactors and other small types of reactors. So, in fact, the things that are typical for communities, like where I live near the three reactors in Oswego County, where they have to have community-wide emergency planning and evacuation plans, evacuation centers, first responder training, and that sort of thing, will basically be eliminated for these kind of reactors that they're talking about building at the DigiHost facility. But just a little more background about me. Like I said, I live in Syracuse. I actually became acquainted with NEARS when I was about 27 years ago, when I was just a community-based, person concerned about the safety of the nuclear plants in Oswego. And NEARS was a resource to us to help us understand the safety problems that we were experiencing with one of the reactors up in Oswego, the 9 Mile Point plant. And then that sort of, basically empowered a lot of us in the central New York region to become much more active and engaged and, in advocating for the closure of those reactors. But I think one of the key lessons to learn from our experience in central New York is that once you have a nuclear power plant operating in your community, it's very, very, very hard to ever get rid of it. And so the time to oppose, a nuclear power plant in your community is before they build it. And unfortunately, here in central New York, we didn't get that opportunity because before when they started building the first nuclear reactor in Oswego County, they didn't tell us it was going to be a nuclear power plant. They just said it was going to be a power plant. And we didn't learn about what it was actually. The people in the community didn't learn about what it was actually going to be until after the reactor was being built. So go to the next slide. So, there's the whole way in which this is going to be framed with the DigiHost and nano-nuclear partnership is that this is an answer not only to your air emissions, but also to climate change, and that we need, if you can go back, go back.
I'm working on it.
That this is an answer to climate change, and this is an answer to all of our environmental problems. And the reality is that nuclear power isn't a climate solution. It's not a safe environmental solution, and it's not clean. What we say is that nuclear power is too dirty, too dangerous, too expensive, and too slow to be a real solution to the climate crisis. And the whole enterprise of nuclear energy is rooted in real problems of environmental injustice. With the way that the fuel is produced from mining uranium, to the operation of nuclear power plants in vulnerable communities where the radioactive waste is produced and released and then eventually stays, except for what's dumped in other communities. Next slide. So, but there's real questions about, whether, this whole proposal to build microreactors to power the DigiHost facility is ever going to happen. And that stems from the whole experience with nuclear energy in the US and the rest of the world. We have almost 100 nuclear reactors still operating in the US, but dozens of them have already been shut down because they weren't safe or economical to operate. But the reason why they're so old is because when we started building nuclear power plants in the U.S., they seemed like they were going to be really cheap, but in fact, it took they became incredibly expensive to build, and they took much, much longer than any other kind of power plant to construct. And so in New York, we're a case study of this. We have we have one of the oldest reactors in the world at 9 Mile Point. We also have the most expensive reactor ever built until recently right next door to it at 9 Mile 2, which back in the 80s cost $6.5 billion to build, which is probably $20 billion today. So because of that consistent sort of trend, we stopped building nuclear reactors in the U.S., and now almost all of them are old. There was an effort about 20 years ago to restart nuclear construction in the U.S. Using what they were newer designs and that were supposed to be less expensive and faster to build. Go to the next slide. And the federal government promised billions of dollars in subsidies and loans and whatnot to make that happen. But it was a dismal failure. Within a few years of the subsidies being passed in 2005, major utilities around the country ordered 30 of these new reactors to be built. But in fact, almost all of them were canceled because they became too expensive and uneconomical for even large utility companies to build. And so now, almost 20 years later, only 2 reactors of those 30 were built in Georgia. 7 years late, took them 18 years to plan and build them, and at a cost of $36 billion for those 2 reactors. And people's rates in Georgia have skyrocketed as a result of this. So because of that failure, what we've seen happen in the last 7 or 8 years is this whole push for new types of reactors, most of them smaller types of reactors that have never really proved commercially viable in the US, like micro reactors, small modular reactors, and other sort of exotic designs of reactors that have just never proved commercially viable. Next slide. So what you see is, this whole sort of industry of startup companies that are pushing these new types of designs, like Nano. And Nano is one of the newest and least experienced of all of these. But to date, none of these small modular reactors or micro reactors or other types of advanced reactors have been approved or constructed or built in the U.S. or just about basically anywhere else in the world. And so this is after 10 or 15 years of these ideas being promoted. There's basically no progress, and there's nothing that has yet been built. In fact, a number of companies and their reactor designs that were proposed have already been canceled or gone bankrupt. Deb mentioned the investor fraud class action suit that's been filed against Nano recently. Nano is the 3rd company like this that has faced investor fraud claims because they keep on pretending that they have a reactor design that's ready to build, and they attract people to buy their stock or invest in them, basically fraudulently, and that's sort of what's going on with Nano. Next slide. So, but what has been clear is that even without approved designs or actual construction happening, the cost of these new reactors is already skyrocketed. So, for instance, you see 3 of these different sort of the major sort of SMR designs here that have been proposed. NuScale was the furthest along that had been proposed back in 2015. They canceled their sort of flagship project a year and a half ago when the cost had tripled, and none of the utilities in the Northwest were willing to buy their power. And so, without ever putting a shovel in the ground, the NuScale demonstration project was canceled. And similar trends are already happening with other of the what are called leading companies like X Energy and GE Hitachi, where utilities, have basically not really signed up to even subscribe to these projects because the costs were already so high. Next slide. So as I mentioned, micro reactors, they have not proven to be a viable technology. The NRC actually rejected the first proposed design for one of these 3 years ago by a company called Oklo, which also has an investor fraud class action suit against it. And that was because NRC had never rejected a license application before, but they had to reject this one because, in fact, Oklo's application was more full of holes than Swiss cheese. And they after a year and a half, they couldn't fill in enough details to even make for, a viable license application to the NRC. But NRC is under a tremendous amount of political pressure from Congress and from the nuclear industry to cut back its safety regulations and make it easier for companies like Nano to get their designs approved and their reactors built. And that's of real concern to those of us who've been, concerned about the safety of nuclear plants for a long time, and to see NRC being pressured to back off even further on its regulations is very concerning. So to kind of sum up, the story with Nano is that, this is a new startup company. It has existed for probably a year or two at this point, but, and it has a very slick website advertising several different reactor designs, but there's no details as to how their reactors would operate. And so even a lot of the details that Rick shared about the boiling water reactors, we don't really know how these reactors would work. They did make a big announcement back in December when they bought the patent rights to a reactor design that was being developed by a company called Ultra Safe Nuclear Corporation that went bankrupt in December, and basically was jettisoning its assets. They did recruit former Governor Andrew Cuomo on their advisory committee and made a big splash at the stock exchange when they launched their stock a few months ago. But to date, Nano hasn't even begun engaging the NRC on approval of its design. And so this idea that the DigiHost is going to be powering its operations in North Tonawanda with nuclear energy is there's no sense that this is really going to be viable for at least 10 years, if not longer. And so, that's, I think, a real concern that, how long is DigiHost going to continue running this crypto line? Are they in this business for the long haul, or are they just going to continue running that gas plant and, and polluting the community, for a few years until they're tired of it, but then never end up building this, never end up, cleaning up their emissions. And so that's the thing that I would sort of be concerned about, is that they're promising something that they can't deliver as a way to kind of deflect criticism of the real environmental impacts they're having in Western New York.
Good points too.
Then there is a push that the governor is leading to sort of expand nuclear energy in New York State, and there's a lot of groups around the state that are really concerned and opposed to this. But one of the things that's going to be happening in the next year is that our Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, has been tasked with basically creating a master plan for nuclear energy in New York State, and that's something that we're watchdogging pretty closely and are going to be working to stop the state from putting any real resources behind building nuclear plants in New York. So just to sum up, there's all of the normal concerns that are true with nuclear energy are true of these small modular reactors and micro reactors, which is that the cost of building them is going to be significant. It may not impact ratepayers because DigiHost ostensibly is going to be using this energy for themselves, but that's going to certainly impact their willingness to move forward with a nuclear construction. And that obviously the time it would take to even do this, the safety of the community from the operation of a reactor that has never been tested before, we don't even know how it would operate, the waste that it would definitely create and that could be left in North Tonawanda for generations. And then, the security and nuclear weapons proliferation concerns, which I could speak more about later if people are interested.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. That was really informative. I know there's a lot to digest. Next up is Tim's colleague, Diane DiRigio, and she is a Western New York native, now living in Maryland. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about the radioactive waste that's generated by these. Oops, it just went out. There's your battery go.
No. Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I guess first off, I should say that whatever, oh, do I need to speak really loudly so people can hear?
Yeah, hang on one second. We just had the projector go. Oh, someone unplugged the. Hang on one second, Diane. Our projector got unplugged for 1 minute. Any questions while we're waiting for that to get up? Yeah.
Knock the lights down, we can't hear, we can see it.
Oh, okay, that's a great idea. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can take the lights down.
One of our girls from back there is not good.
Yeah, we had one, but it wasn't working. It wasn't something.
Yeah, we were testing the.
Wait.
Yeah, let her get it hooked up
It's
first.
unplugged from the back of the laptop, isn't it down the bottom?
Oh, no, that's just the power cord for the laptop. That's,
All right.
yeah. Let's see. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is I gotta stop the share for a second.
Yep.
I gotta go into here.
Yep.
Show devices.
Yes. Hey, Keith, yep.
The question I have is this, show when that, the New York State Senate has, told my server to be studying these, Michael, is when that study is going to be completed?
I don't know that there's a specific time frame for that. They put out an RFI in November of 2024, so it's fairly recent. I don't know if you know. Yeah, so.
We don't want that, we don't want our taxpayer
No.
money to pay for a study for that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least
Just
our
waste the
money,
money,
and they don't spend it for people.
But if they're doing it already, I'm just curious, because I clearly want to see what they think about that, right? I mean, they may solve the problem, right? If they come back and say there's no way.
Well, you have companies like Nano and that have responded to the RFI. So if that's any indication of the caliber of company that's responding to it, I hope to stay to see through
I
all
mean,
that.
I'm not saying I'm gonna agree with them what they come back with, but the point would be is at least that's a step that somebody at the state level is looking at this, and not just relying on the poor communities to actually be figuring out what the heck is gonna happen.
Yeah, the challenge with that, Keith, I think is that, we've seen it recently with the DEC. There was that 2-year moratorium on Bitcoin mining, right? For that window. And during that time, the DEC was supposed to be preparing a study about the environmental impacts of Bitcoin mining related to the energy use and all these other things. They still, I don't even know if they've started a bridge, have they? I mean,
Yeah, last I'd heard about like that study, DEC had like fielded it out, to like look for a contractor to do it for them. And I haven't heard like anything about like anything.
yeah, we keep
forward.
asking them, what's the status? And so the moratorium is now expired.
Mhm.
Thankfully, we have our own now in the city, but so that 2-year moratorium is expired without the environmental impact assessment.
We're not optimistic that anything good is gonna come out of this stuff.
I just don't see it. If history is any indication, I don't think it'll be thorough or timely. I'm skeptical. Oh, 1 year?
1 year,
1 year?
1107, yeah.
So we'll see.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, Diane, we're back on. We have power.
Thank you.
So,
I just need to know if I should yell or not.
okay, yeah, as loud as you can. We also have the transcript turned on so we can read it a little bit. So, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Diane DeRigo. I'm with the Nuclear Information and Resource Service, same as Tim. I grew up in Western New York and worked on radioactive waste issues in Western New York from around 1978 or 9 until 86 when I came to DC to work for NEARS. And at that time, there were many, and there still are many radioactive waste sites in Western New York. I was incredulous to hear that anybody would try to put a nuclear reactor in Western New York, which has more waste from the Manhattan Project. New York has more waste than any other country, any other state, and Western New York has more than anywhere in New York. We have, and in Tonawanda, there are at least 5, 7 sites. Some are claimed to be cleaned up, and some are still in progress. But the Western New York region, and this is, down my slides a little further, has certainly its share of nuclear waste, some of the hottest radioactive waste in the country. If you could jump down 2 slides to the radionuclides. So as the previous speaker said, when uranium atoms are split to release a lot of energy to heat the water and turn the turbines, they break into other radioactive elements. And these radioactive elements remain hazardous. They're biologically hazardous for 10 to 20 half-lives. Some of the uraniums absorb neutrons and form plutonium. So whenever you have a nuclear reactor, whether it's a big one or a little one or a micro one, if you're relying on electricity coming from the splitting of uranium, you will have the formation of hundreds of radionuclides. Some are listed here: plutonium, iodine, strontium, cesium, and these remain dangerous. They're dangerous now, and they remain dangerous for tens of thousands to literally millions of years. Iodine 121, it's one of my favorites. 16 million year half-life, dangerous for 160 to 320 million years, goes to the thyroid like any other iodine atom that isn't radioactive. So we would be putting, if we were to allow a reactor in the community, we would be generating these and many other radionuclides for which there is no permanent isolation known to people, known to man. We do not have a permanent place to isolate this material. Sometimes they call it high-level waste, sometimes they call it low-level waste. But all of these wastes, if it's from a reactor, have some of these isotopes, if not all of these isotopes, in them, and they would need to be isolated, and they could not do it in a small reactor in North Tonawanda. Every reactor in New York, every reactor in the world is storing its high-level radioactive waste, the irradiated fuel from the core of reactors, and its so-called low-level waste, the other stuff that gets contaminated that isn't the irradiated or spent fuel that was talked about before, that has some of these radio elements in them. And so-called low-level waste can give a lethal dose in 20 minutes unshielded. So it's nothing to sneeze at. Low level is not low risk. There is no safe level. So go up 1 slide, if you can, back 1 slide.
Let's see. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so if there was a reactor to be brought into the community, where would the waste go? None of the reactors right now have anywhere to send it. It's sitting indefinitely at reactors around the country, around the world. Some in the water-filled pools, some in the dry canisters. In any case, the waste is going to stay dangerous longer than the container that holds it. And we don't need to create more of this. We have more in Western New York than anybody should have. The government promises to take it away, but there is no away. The other problem with it is, and others have mentioned this before me, that the waste could be used for a dirty bomb. It could also be used, if it were reprocessed, to actually make nuclear weapons. And a lot of little reactors around the country and around the world increase dramatically the danger of proliferation of nuclear weapons and dirty bombs. For nuclear power, it is completely uneconomic, has been discussed. And our state and federal tax dollars are being used to build new reactors if they ever happen, and to keep the existing ones running. The massive subsidies to the 4 reactors operating in New York, let's see, 1, two, three, four. Yeah, four. It's not a competitive industry. If DigiHost thinks it's going to own this thing and be taking care of it, it's got to have a lot of money to deal with the waste that's generated. And nuclear power communities, as I said, are de facto permanent waste storage sites. And then we'll go 2 down on the slides. So some of the waste already in Western New York is at West Valley, about 30 miles south of Buffalo, upstream and upwind. It was a place that was supposed to, quote, recycle radioactive waste. It reprocessed it. It brought the waste, which is those fuel rods that were described before. They were brought to West Valley from, some were actually from Gannett, north of Rochester, from all the old reactors in the 60s and 70s. There were 640,000 tons that were reprocessed, chopped up, dissolved in acids and bases, and they extracted uranium and plutonium, supposedly for more nuclear power fuel, but it was never used for that. It may have gone into weapons. It went to the Department of Energy, but it was never used for more nuclear power fuel. And what we have now is a long-lasting, potentially permanent, probably permanent nuclear waste site in Western New York, which is estimated to cost $10 billion tax dollars to clean up. 1% from New York taxes, 1% from federal taxes. New York, NYSERDA owns that site. NYSERDA has the audacity to talk about more nuclear power when it cannot fully clean up the waste from the reactors that operated and had their fuel reprocessed in the 60s and 70s. Where did they get off on saying we should invest in more nuclear when we can't manage the waste from the reactors in the 60s and 70s? It's the same kind of waste. It's still got all those isotopes that I mentioned. And the newer reactors are going to have higher concentrations of that waste because they're presumably going to use more highly concentrated uranium fuel. And so the problems are dramatically worse if they were to proceed. So that's West Valley. And it does threaten us here because it has leaked into the waterways. They've found radioactivity in Lake Ontario from West Valley. It drains into the creeks that gush into Lake Erie and then flow past the Western New York water intakes and then up the Niagara River and so forth. So it's an issue that we should be concerned about. The other sites in Western New York, there were the Manhattan Project sites from the development of atomic weapons. As I said, we have more here than concentrated than anywhere else in the country, and they are in various stages of remediation. You can flip to the next slide, please. So Lewiston, the Niagara Falls storage site, the Tonawanda Linde-owned Union Carbide facilities at Tonawanda, in the landfill, the landfill mudflats, Unit 3 at Seaway, and there are dozens of others. The Investigative Post and Wall Street Journal and there's one other newspaper that have done research and listed a lot of these Department of Energy and Army Corps of Engineers sites that are left over from the Manhattan Project. And then, of course, there were smoke detectors that were being generated, that were being built, manufactured in Western New York. This was in the 80s, and there was a push to, there was a law that passed that everybody had to have smoke detectors. We were trying at that time to make sure that they weren't radioactive. The americium detectors are the ones that were pushed by the Department of Energy because they had extra americium from reprocessing nuclear weapons fuel and wanted to try to market it. We couldn't stop it because we had factories in Western New York, and then the factories closed, contaminated the area. The cleanup resulted in dumping it in landfills in Western New York. Now, some of those have started to leak. Americium is long lasting and it's a dangerous isotope. And we're one of the places in the country that is suffering from that. So we have plenty of sites. We don't need a new one. we should know, because waste was brought here from other places, that there is no other place to send it. And see what the next slide is here. This is again another view of some of the Manhattan Project sites. Probably people that live in the area now are familiar with some of those, and if not, we can learn more about that and push for cleaning up what we have rather than making more. And next slide.
Sorry, hang on one second. There we go.
Yeah, I went over West Valley some. It, like I said, brought in the irradiated fuel, spent fuel from reactors, and ended up splitting it open and contaminating the area. And at one point, Cattaraugus Creek, which runs from there into Lake Erie, was the hottest radioactive water in the country. The workers were the highest exposed. We now are struggling decades later to get the stuff dug up out of the ground so that it doesn't leak more into the watershed and contaminate our water supply. It's taking decades and most likely will never be fully cleaned up. And in 2026, we're all going to have to get together to push for a full cleanup of that site. There'll be an environmental impact process going on. And I think my last slide's coming up. Now, this is the irradiated fuel. After it's reprocessed, it's put into a solid form, and that's sitting on a pad in casks at West Valley. And, as I said, the radioactive waste is going to be dangerous longer than the containers. One more. Next, yeah. This is how the waste was buried, pictures from the 60s and 70s. So there is a concern that it's going to leak out. Some of it has. Next slide. So this is my concluding thought, is that New York should know better than to repeat the past mistakes that are still endangering our health, our water supply, our environment, and our economy. And North Tonawanda can say no to dirty, dangerous, expensive, slow, and environmentally unjust nuclear power. That's it.
Thank you, Diane. We have the lights back up. So just to reiterate what some of the concerns are, pollution of local waterways, our source drinking water here in Western New York. And we talked about the RFI that NYSERDA issued a couple months ago. And if you listen to Governor Hochul's State of the State address last month, she was touting nuclear energy as a solution to achieving the climate goals. And NRC has now issued draft guidelines to facilitate these micro reactor sightings. So, at first blush, when we heard this announcement about DigiHost and Nano, we thought this was just yet another pie in the sky thing that they were trying to deflect attention from their significantly increased emissions at a time where they know the DEC is considering their air permit renewal. And we don't see how it could be renewed if their emissions continue where they are. And the Public Service Commission also has to reassess the actual sale of that Fortistar plant to DigiHost, taking the New York climate law and their targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions into account. So knowing that that's all happened, we thought, oh, they're going to try and say that nuclear is their solution to this. But if 2031, that's their projection of when they would be able to, site that there. And I think we've all seen that seems pretty unrealistic. And in the meantime, they'll continue to burn all those emissions that the bridge had showed us earlier. The other thing that we're starting to see as we continue these discussions with communities across the country is we're starting to see this disturbing trend of what's called right to mine laws. So you've heard of probably like right to farm in some rural areas. These right to mine laws are being proposed by the Bitcoin companies in several states to ensure they have unlimited access to energy and that they don't have to comply with any environmental regulations. We've got, I know Bridge is recording this and we'll send out the link to it. So, but just a few examples in Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, I think is also considering it. There were a few others that were talked about on our monthly call with the National Coalition Against Cryptocurrency Mining yesterday. So that's what we're starting to see is this nonsense that is marketed by these Bitcoin companies to avoid all the environmental regulations and anything else that might, that might hinder their access to sources of energy. So because of all those risks and concerns, and that we don't want North Tonawanda to be the guinea pigs for these new microreactors, Mayor Tylik has proposed a local law, and I'll have him come up and talk a little bit about that local law and what the next steps are for that. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks for having me, Deb.
Yep.
So, I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is currently being proposed right now. There's a public hearing on the 11th. I found out about this topic in end of December, I believe. Jeff Gondek here reached out, and of course, it created concerns. Similar to the data mining facility, we don't have any codes in place because I always use the analogy if an alien ship lands in NT, of course, we don't have zoning regulations for that. So the idea of a moratorium was thrown around, but the problem with moratoriums is you actually have to do something during that time, right? And we're already talking about examples. So someone who I can't name in here who assisted with this was a very short local law that basically would hit the brakes on any type of nuclear plant or micronuclear type of energy. Again, because we don't have any regulations in place, there's a lot of unknowns as we went through here. And so I mentioned this to the council, and they do seem in favor of it. Now, they did want to include also hydro, coal, wind, and gas, any new of that. It wouldn't do anything to anything existing like the energy plant on Erie Ave right now, but again, we don't have zoning laws for those types of energy sources. So I do feel confident that this will pass. And What specifically will pass? so within this local law, it would basically restrict any type of these energy alternatives in the city. So no one would be able to bring in nuclear. We feel pretty confident. It's not too long, and we still feel it's a solid way forward.
It covers transportation, right? So you can restrictions on transportation of nuclear materials, no reprocessing, no storing, no dumping.
Right. Basically, no nuclear items would pass through or be a part of the city at this time. And the news, I believe the Buffalo News touched and asked this question, well, you know, why not a moratorium? Why this? Like, what's the difference here? And, you know, I hope to be here for many years, but there could be different leaders down the road. And just like how these moratoriums run up, and if no one does anything in that time frame, it's a lot quieter for people to get away with things like new leaders. So, you know, the 2 years could pass, we could all be gone. But with this, it creates a lot more attention. There's public hearings, there's a lot more discussions about it. There's a different type of process to some extent. So this felt like a safer way forward.
And plus the time frame is going to be a decade or more, right? A moratorium.
Well, I believe you can only do a moratorium for 2 years, but you can extend, right? You keep extending. So even with New York State, I don't know, but I was surprised they didn't extend if that was, yeah.
This does say though that you can transport it.
But you have to notify basically, yes.
45 days or.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the idea of just across the board? Citizens of North Tonawanda do not want to have nuclear power, anything in our community. Put it right across the board.
That's what this is.
I mean, that's part of the discussion here. And I understand the state is trying to reach these energy or climate goals, and they're looking at alternatives to do so. But again, there's a lot of unknowns, and as it was described here by Rick, right? Rick, nice to meet you. That the current regulations in place don't really specify a lot on this micronuclear piece. And again, I always keep an open mind. There might be something years from now where, you know, alien technology somehow gets rid of the waste. I don't know. But, you know, this is really to just hit the brakes and then force a discussion. If someone really feels that nuclear is a good option, they need to prove it to elected officials who's ever in that place, and express that, educate the community on why it's okay. So, but for now, there should be a safe way forward.
We like that because it forces them to prove that it's safe.
More or
Where when
less.
DigiPost came in, they weren't asked to prove anything. So.
Yeah, right, so the question that I have, right, of course I hear dirty bombs, possible nuclear weapons. I just wonder if that poses a problem. I mean, we're a board, we're right here.
Well,
Like, that makes us a
I think that's a pretty aggressive question. I mean, yeah, I don't think I have the answer there, but I, you know, I don't know how to answer that one.
Like a foreign-born, like a foreign company having that
Oh,
in our country,
well,
in our city, that would be a problem.
I mean, Canada is an ally. I mean, if that's what you're, you know, it is a little, I understand, but that's the first time I've heard a concern with.
Well, no, she just said it.
So,
She just said it.
we'll with Canada and.
No,
the
she just
board.
said that there's potential for.
Oh, that, yeah, but specific to Canada, that's the first time anyone's raised a concern about the Canadian piece to it, yes.
Can you, if the law is passed, can you do something with Niagara County legislature to pass a moratorium?
That would be up to the county legislature.
And that's part of this, the reason for this information session is,
Start
talk to
small.
other communities, Niagara County, and just gotta go broader and broader and just see if others are seeing this morning.
The city of Niagara Falls, because they have Bitcoin mining too, so we're in contact with them. I've been in contact with some people in Wakefield, so we don't know. We're gonna be the people that are gonna move forward on it. We're gonna be first.
We'll take the steps to protect ourselves, and hopefully other people can learn.
Yep.
There's another industry I think that we are also potentially missing right now, and that's AI. Because if the AI infrastructure and the amount of heat in the servers and all that fun stuff is comparable to Bitcoin. And, you know, they're planning on building how many plants across the United States. So if we do this now and we say yes to this, it's not just gonna be about for Bitcoin, but other potential places. Yes, I see.
That would be part of the Bitcoin zone.
Yeah, so just to add on this, so that moratorium, that's a little too late, but still in effect, if there was another data mining facility and or current one expands, again, you still have to do something. And we got a zoning grant to basically update our zoning laws and how the city is sort of sectioned off, I guess, like what's residential, what's commercial, what's industrial. And part of the discussion is, you know, do we need to supplement new rules for the data piece of it, right? Or AI or any of that. So we would end up hiring outside experts, like a planning firm of sorts, to help us through that.
But I will say that also we have a foresight in this 2-year moratorium that was approved in July unanimously by the council. Also had the foresight to include, you know, our request was to ban cryptocurrency mining. He had the foresight to also include, to expand that scope, and it also includes AI and data centers, because as we've learned, Bitcoin can come in disguise as a data center. So thank you for.
But it can also still be a data center because the governor wants Empire AI. So.
Yeah. So, is there anything else? Yep.
Have you talked to the governor?
The governor's office about this?
Yes.
Specifically? Yeah, I've talked to her people over the course of.
No, personally to her.
Oh, no, when I run into her, it's a quick handshake, but yeah.
Could I throw something in here that there were dozens of resolutions and nuclear-free zone resolutions and in some cases laws passed in the, I believe it was the late 1990s to prevent high-level nuclear waste dumps, which were being promoted around the country. So this is something that has been done in the past and defended legally.
All right.
Sir?
Clark?
I just have a question about New York State law superseding local laws in terms of siting of a micro nuclear power plant. They say it falls under the auspices of the DEC or whatever for New York State, and that it overrides local law on siting. Is that a possibility?
So if we restricted our zoning, I don't see that overriding. We would pause it here. They would oversee more, yeah.
Our law that I wrote.
Now
The
she admits to help.
The local law is based on the city of Oneonta, who already has, back in the 90s, a nuclear-free zone in that city. That is under home rule law, our prerogative to be able to locate any business or not located within the city by zoning, but under home rule law. So we're basing it on that law, and hopefully it won't be preempted by the state.
Yep.
One question, the 14 acres, does he own that already?
Which 14 acres?
Well, he said he's going for these 14 acres.
Oh, he's talking about DigiHost in their
yes.
January update to investors last
Yes,
week.
it was.
They're talking about expansion.
And they currently can't expand. Are you talking about the eastern part, like along Meadow Drive?
Well, I'm talking about 14 acres. He said
Right
that
next
he's
to
gonna
it.
expand. Can he put anything else, like that moratorium you have, can he build anything else on that property?
If it's related to the data mining or AI piece, no. No, you wouldn't be able to expand or add new.
Yeah, they're grandfathered in for their existing, because the planning commission approved their site plan, but they can't expand, which means they can't add electricity, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. And they requested from NISO another 50 megawatts. They're also trying to get more energy here with the nuclear, and then they want to physically expand on those 14 acres. So I guess that's a question, Austin, for our city attorney. How is he enforcing our moratorium? Is he going to tell them remind them that there's a moratorium and they can just stop talking about this?
Building permits.
Yeah, so it'd be like if you were trying to do something that goes against our residential zoning, the building department gets involved. I mean, if it really becomes a spat, then it becomes a much more, bigger issue, I guess.
By saying that they can.
If it's the land I believe you're talking about that was formerly owned by, I believe, the Rezel family, yes, because they changed the access point or added that road from Meadow Drive, right, to change the entrance, right? So yes. Okay. Erie and Meadow, there's a large parcel that was recently sold and that they purchased.
Really?
Huh? If I'm pretty certain, yeah, they purchased the site from.
When did they do that? September, well.
6 months? No, it was sooner than that. That land, the additional just land, there's nothing on it, it's like trees and stuff. It was within the last year, I believe, sometime around that, so. Right, there's kind of wetlands on the northern end of the existing site, so, yeah. Yes, Susan?
I just get information. Nuclear power plants, insurance companies. Can you stand up, Susan? Yes. Okay, you got a lot of good information to share.
Susan, would you speak up louder?
Okay. Nuclear power plants are not, insurance companies will not insure nuclear power plants.
It will not insure them because they are so dangerous.
And she's right. And they in our insurance, we are expressly exempted from having coverage. Our insurance for our houses, our cars, our renters, or whatever, it expressly says does not cover nuclear accidents, nuclear contamination. That's already the case. Good point.
Know how dangerous this garbage is.
That's why all the utilities are self-insured.
We don't need to consider, well, for homeowners, if this happens, our property is gonna take.
I understand. I mean, I sit here screaming about certain people who didn't listen at the get-go and were looking at $1 instead of neighborhoods. You know, and I have an open mind. I would always admit there is always potential, and I tell Deb this too. Maybe they could have been here in some way, fashion, where it was not a disturbance, where it didn't affect the environment. I'm always keeping an open mind, but that just obviously didn't happen. So
if you were to put them fans on it, didn't make noise, we wouldn't be here now.
I understand that, right? I mean
Yeah,
that's.
so one of the things, so I'll give you an example. If Austin's 3-month moratorium would have been approved by the council back in 2021, there would have been 3 months for us to get a better understanding of this proof of work versus proof of state. And then we could have said a requirement is proof of work is banned. You must use one of the more energy efficient ones. And then they wouldn't have to listen to me complaining about the emissions, the residents complaining about the noise. It really would have been a different type of business.
Good elected officials. Okay.
One, would you need an entirely new dedicated emergency department in case of an accident? And, let me find my note here. We already talked about including neighboring towns, including another neighboring country, ambulance and whatnot. Yeah. And, the wastewater. Do we have the infrastructure to handle if there's a giant increase in wastewater? Would our infrastructure and sewer system or wherever, however it would be transported, would we even be able to handle wastewater, whether it's from cooling or whatever? Is it even?
So the first question about the emergency management that was brought up, I know that was.
But would it be nuclear dedicated?
Well, can I answer?
Go ahead.
They said that a nuclear accident is very rare. Rare is not business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that would take an expert to really dive into that piece of it, and that would ultimately, I believe, go through like planning. Planning could set those parameters. The planning board. Your second question about water. So we have specific to North Tonawanda, we do have quite large water and wastewater plants. So I believe our wastewater plant can do 17 or 20 million gallons a day, something like that. Yeah, it's pretty big because we had a lot of industry back when. And
they were expecting we're going to have 60,000 people living here. Never happened, and that's the white elephant.
So and we're making repairs and so on, but I guess it would just depend, like whatever water source you're talking about. I mean, currently the infrastructure.
Transportation of the water from the plant to
right.
The facility.
So infrastructure for that. There's no dedicated sewer line from like Erie. I mean, you know, cutting over still being lifted.
But there is a large line. Like we do handle the right. What is the math? 500,000 gallons a day or something at the Erie Ave plant, and then the steam and the cools, and then about 100,000 gallons a day goes to our system. And there's regulations on temperature too. So you can only put that water back into the system if it's a high number. It's somewhere like 100. No, it's higher than that, I believe. Because I always thought, like, you know, your electric water heater, you can set it to like 115, 120, like that's kind of the idea. So there are requirements there.
What is that?
So there's because it's a local law. Local law needs to go through a public hearing. What are you looking at here? And
Public hearing.
that is February 11th. Anyone's welcome to come and.
Is anything been put out before public hearing so people can read?
Yeah, so this was on not Tuesday, but the previous Tuesday's agenda, just to, put it out there. And then this will be out there for the 11th. So I believe the agenda should go up tomorrow.
Yeah.
What's that? At the City Hall, council chambers.
Yeah, we can email this out
It's
too.
at 6, I believe, or 6:30. Sometimes public hearings are a
Yeah.
little earlier than the regular meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Will the other concerns, the other two concerns that we've been talking about tonight be at that public hearing?
Which ones are those?
The Bitcoin company and
Yeah.
are they?
It's specific to the alternative energy source and hitting the brakes on various alternative energy sources because we
So we
don't.
won't be hearing from them.
Will Nano or Will Nano or Digital.
Oh, no, I don't believe that. I mean, they're welcome to attend if they'd like. They might be there.
They'll be invited.
They'll be invited?
Okay.
No one's inviting anyone other
public
than
hearing.
just it's a public hearing, so anyone anyone is welcome to
Were they
attend.
invited tonight?
I doubt it.
I believe.
I just wanted to know if they just didn't bother to show up or they were invited.
It's a waste of time for them, yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of it.
Yes. Larry?
Last summer, when all the noise was being generated, there were concerns from the residents about how can we stop the noise? And so we had to have a decibel measuring machine, we had to have dedicated police officers that would be taught how to use those machines so we could actually issue summonses. Has anything been purchased and have our people trained?
We did hire the outside acoustic expert. His name is Les with Noise Pollution Clearinghouse. And we have a committee, which includes a member from DigiHost, a council member, myself, Frank, who I believe is on the call.
He's on Zoom.
Yes, and our police chief and, oh my gosh, I'm missing people. I know Jack's on it. I'm trying, but so we purchased the equipment per the recommendation, and we were planning to set something up for the beginning of March, I believe, for Les to come here because he's a state over and do a 2-day education piece for a couple officers, code enforcement, I believe a member or two from DigiHost too, just the core group of people who would want to have this information, and then also do additional readings. So we already did readings with Les when the plant was quiet many months ago. The plant is now again operational, so the idea was to wait until it was operational, full blast, so we could understand what kind of noise is coming from it.
I applied for that first question, now we've got the equipment. If we were to find that the noise that was in excess of the allowable amount, could we shut them down?
It's a complicated process. Yeah, so I think it's a little too soon to give a definitive answer on how that would play out. I don't want to say anything without fully understanding how that process. It's not like a house party, right? Where police come, they knock on your door and you quiet down. It's a much different scenario here, but we are taking. I know it's slow, but it's better to do it right at this point. And
So that we get holds up in court, 'cause right now.
And that might be the next step, readings come in, it's under whatever the regulations are, or it's over, and then that's a whole conversation about how do you, giving an opportunity to reduce it one way or another, and then go from there.
How about the work of-
Are there signs attributed to those noise waves? Or is that a
Sign? Fine.
Oh,
Fine.
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 Yeah, they're like $250 though, you know.
I just found one Bitcoin of the price. It's
No, what is-
$96,000.
Is it 96,000?
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
Which
I just want
way?
I'm going to the next slide, in addition to the noise study, we're also updating the city's noise ordinance. So we're
Correct.
30 years old. We know a lot more thanks to Jack and some other experts that we've talked to about, what the decibel level should be and what the components of the decibel should be. So, DBA is what is typically in a municipal noise ordinance. DBC is really what we need to include to capture that low frequency industrial noise that's being generated there. So that will be updated in our noise ordinance. But
Yes.
again, we've got to go through the process.
When the police people and measure it, they come to measure, or is it gonna be like a surprise visit?
I mean, when we did the first initial visit with, Jack, you were there, right? So Jack was there, last member from DigiHost, and, they're pretty cordial and open to doing the readings and so on. So I know what you're insinuating, I get it, but yeah, I think it would be understood, like, if it was significantly quieter, and it would raise.
So if someone calls you at 2 a.m. saying it's, the noise, someone's gonna go there and measure it at that point?
Well, there's gonna be a more strategic route with this outside acoustic expert who will come when it is running at full capacity. And that's something that we all are on the same page that we need to do. But yeah, I mean, that's something we have had police in the past go out and just do readings at different locations, but again, they didn't get the training that we're talking about through this less.
You're gonna train a couple of police officers, right?
Yeah, no, they're gonna be a part of that 2-day, I believe it's a 2-day course, 4 hours, something like that.
Yes.
Oh, 2 a.m.
Around there. Well, right, I send the police after people, I guess, right? Yeah. What was that? So like I said, they were a little down for a little bit, a few months, I believe, so it was minimally running, but I believe they're up and running now. The energy plan is, I believe they have been for the last week or so.
Yeah, just look at the phone.
Yeah, nighttime.
That's why he said 2 a.m.
Yeah, the whole decibel acoustic piece, it's very complicated. The trees, weather, I mean, ambient noise, I've learned more than I ever thought I'd care for.
We had a problem with Torres years ago. After 11 o'clock, they were letting stuff come out the chimney. And it was then later, yeah, this is true. That was not kosher. That was a violation. So we have to really attack that noise problem, because when you have that especially over decades, you go you can't hear anymore. It's very important, this issue.
I agree.
That's why we're here.
That's why I'm here. Anyone bring a pitchfork or? Anything else with?
Another issue is this topic gets more verbal and more out there to the public. We gotta start worrying about our property values, the people that are closest to this plant. And our property values are gonna go to the floor.
We don't want that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, part of my responsibility is to make sure that we raise property values in the city, and we have done a good job. I mean, there are kinks such as stuff like this. But I mean, that's what we're here for, and we're gonna do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Do you think we're gonna attract people wanting to move in North Tonawanda when they know we have a nuclear reactor?
Not if you have anything to do about it, Sonia.
I'll help.
They don't have they don't have, or Tonawanda doesn't have one.
The nuclear.
Right.
No.
That's so.
Yeah.
We want to keep it like that.
I was wondering that maybe you could pick us to this. I know it seems weird, but the policemen, I'm not on shift, I can't go do the sound stuff, but can't you get a few intelligent citizens trained to be part of the citizen force. I mean, the only way we're gonna get activism is if citizens jump in and say, I know this kind of science, why don't you train some people who are maybe have certain requirements?
Who's up late all the time anyway.
They have a science degree, they understand, this kind of stuff, but the noise will affect you on a cellular level, and I talked about this at the council meeting. It raises your cortisol, makes people goofy, it ruins your body systems, but I think within your measuring of the noise, we need more latitude and more opportunity to monitor the noise when it's really loud. 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. Well, on a clear night, no humidity, no wind, no rain, no snow. I mean, there are times when I'm a mile away and I can really hear. So I think there just needs to be more put into the detection and monitoring piece.
Well, I
That would be
mean,
legal.
okay, the thing like Jack going with them, right, is like maybe, it depends who you ask, unbiased perspective. Some people might think a police officer is an unbiased, opinion or code enforcement. I mean, that you try your best to just keep it as fair and unbiased as you can. So, and I mean, I surround myself with smart people like Maureen and Deb and many of you here. And, that's part of it. And so.
We got a couple questions out.
Am I good?
Well, it's like,
Wait,
it was.
this gentleman?
Provide any benefits to their jobs. They should be selling themselves to us rather than us showing up here, getting ready with the torches and the pitchforks. What do they do for us?
So job wise, there was some with the construction, when it was going up and it was a few $1 million for the construction. The assessed value of the property only raised a little bit, not a huge amount. So there wasn't really the property tax that was like a huge income piece. I believe maybe it raised $20,000 extra a year with the amount of improvements, somewhere around there. The water use was, as former council members mentioned, that was the biggest thing, because it was about $150,000 a quarter if it was running at full capacity, not just as a peaker plant, but as the new use, I suppose. So that was the dollar signs.
If there was an accident, North Tonawanda processing plant provides water for both Niagara Falls and Lockport as well.
If there was, do we currently? No, we do not. We only supply water for North Tonawanda. Yes, Lockport, that facility at the end of Wheatfield, that is an intake, and that just goes to Lockport, and then they treat their water there. Mm-hmm.
But I think
Another clap. That's funny.
The jobs thing, when they came to do their presentation to us, they said, oh, we'll be bringing lots of plenty of high-paying, high-tech jobs. And they said, well, how many? Oh, lots. No, how many? And I think he said, 30 to 40. And they're not high-tech. It's basically, making staff to make sure these computers and these stack shipping containers don't catch on fire. It's not high-tech. You've got a plant manager and maybe a few.
Are they non-union? Are they non-union?
Yeah.
We're getting a little off.
Well, right there.
I'm not here to bash anyone. But yeah, water was the main income piece that was brought up. Sir?
All right.
Yeah. This guy loves clapping for me. Come on. This gentleman.
I just wanted to bring one thing up to you all. There is a naval nuclear laboratory in New York, so they might come prepared. Okay, so don't just think that you're all ready to go. They literally have these laboratories in New York that they work on many nuclear reactors and do R&D research for the naval ships for the Navy. And they will come and tell you that they've never had a nuclear reactor meltdown in a mini nuclear reactor on any of those naval shifts. I mean, you come in and bring all this stuff in. No, I'm just being honest with you, because they're going to have data from, Nick, where it said, Nispaguna, New York, and Milton, New York, to try and back up what they want to do.
So we have the local law.
Manhattan Project.
The confident.
There are places that
Watch Bailey.
Thank you. Okay, no more clapping. Okay.
All right, so I guess just a couple more, updates.
Next slide.
So,
Yeah, one mic, one mic.
couple more quick updates, I think you guys can see this. So, we mentioned at our last community meeting back in mid-December that, there were two separate court rulings, two separate judges in December that, that were good for us. One of them was the judge saying that the Public Service Commission, who approved the sale of the Fortistar Peaker plant to DigiHost for the sole purpose of Bitcoin mining, that they have, the judge said the PSC has to go back and reevaluate that. And they have to take in New York State's climate goals into effect. So you can see, this is just, there are probably 30 different items, most of them related to emissions data that the PSC has asked for DigiHost, and DigiHost has to supply it by the 13th of this month. So we have Earth Justice, who has been fighting this battle on our behalf, and they are like a dog with a bone on this. They are not letting the PSC just kind of, oh, when we get to it, we get to it. They're making sure that they're following up on it. So stay tuned for that, but just want to let you know that this is, you know, it's not going to solve the problem next week, next month, maybe not even next year, but we are moving forward. Where can we follow what's going on? So when you signed in, if you included your email address, name, address, and email address, I can add you to our distribution list, and we send out periodic updates via email just to let people know, you know, what's going on. Yeah, you know what there probably is, and I know Kate's been taking some great notes here. I like the idea of that Citizen Action Network.
I'm sorry, I think a citizen committee of educated people who understand on medical and on science, you just can't gloss this stuff over and give it to taxpayers and say, oh, this is good for you. It isn't good for you. There are cancer clusters in this city. There's pollution coming out of that plant all the time. I mean, people with lung issues are having trouble, but I think the mayor really needs to think about a broader group of people who have that kind of the interest, the energy, and the will to commit to making this a better city by monitoring this. So I don't know, I think.
So there's other things happening. There's a comprehensive plan. I know Keith is on the committee that's been working that. So the comprehensive plan, which will lead to changes in zoning. You know, we could, is Maureen still here, Maureen Harding? I know she would love to ban cryptocurrency mining. You can do that. So those are things we can do moving forward.
So I want to say, to piggyback on what you were saying, and you're offered to volunteer. The notion of citizen science is out there across everywhere. It started up in Europe as part of their open science initiative, allowing people to be citizen scientists and contribute to the data that was being used by scientists. The United States has a citizen science.gov. I mean, we do have that. So there is a potential to create something. It depends on this decibel issue, what they develop, if there's certain equipment. You know, I laughingly, is there an app? But then you have to be careful. If there's an app, you know, you gotta do it the right way. But I mean, there is a potential for us to be scientists. We can contribute to the data because we're living it every
Program
day.
is
things, you
developed
see
by
things,
scientists.
yeah.
Get all the data. You gotta have
Right,
data.
and,
You gotta
and
have science.
crowdsourcing data has become a huge thing in science right now, you know?
That's excellent. On that note, Bridge, do you want to talk a little bit about the Purple Monitor program? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of right up this alley, right? Citizen science.
Yeah.
And I know Karen had that question in the
Yeah.
Zoom chat.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have a grant with the Department of Environmental Conservation to do distribute these purple air monitors. They're like about the size of softball. What they do is they pick up what's called particulate matter, like PM 2.5. This is like the very fine particles in the air, that could be anything from carbon to some hazardous air pollutants. It's all picked up it's all picked up as the monitor uses lasers to pick up these particles in the air. It doesn't tell you what those particles are, just that there's a concentration of them. So we have a bunch more that we can distribute. If there's a couple that are in Tonawanda, in North Tonawanda. If a couple other people want them. But the key thing I want to caution with citizen science is that it needs to be attached to a strategy. So it's not just collecting the data. It's what are you going to do with that data? How are you going to leverage your power, to make our regulators step in here? How are we going to use that to pass legislation to regulate these industries? It's collecting that data, but then it's also the question of how do we move that forward with that data? So.
Right.
Expanding with people participating. The problem in North Carolina, people are remember the 50s, oh, you can't fight City Hall. Yes, you can fight City Hall, and you can win. But you've got to be persistent in speaking up. And
Absolutely. It's all got to be organized.
I work up at UB and I talked about the Bitcoin mining with someone who's in planning and in environmental justice. And he doesn't live in North Tonawanda, but he's got an extensive background in doing this type of research. So he was very interested in it. So
well, that might be a nice thing to add for our next community info session.
Something else I want to add is these data centers. It's not just North Tonawanda. It's there's one of the campaigns I work on is the former Tonawanda Coke facility. And the fellow who's developing that site wants to do data centers there. And he has very close ties to the cryptocurrency mining industry. There's cryptocurrency mining happening at American Axle in the city of Buffalo. There's cryptocurrency mining happening in Niagara Falls. And right now, folks with the Seneca and Tuscarora Nations are in a big fight over this stamp facility in Genesee County, where all these companies have pulled out one by one. And what's the economic development agency there is pushing for is data centers. So we are one community in this whole picture of communities all across New York, the nation, who are all pushing back on this, and it's disproportionately impacting environmental justice communities. So it's that's an example of how we can leverage power on this. Is that is getting connected to those other fights and pushing together collectively, because right now, you heard UB is pushing for, data centers, and AI and such. Governor Hochul is very much in favor of this new AI economy. And so we have to get organized with these other communities and push back collectively, because otherwise right now, that's the power dynamics are, against us. So we got to get organized collectively.
All right, any other questions? Thanks for coming, everyone. Again, if you want to have be part of the updates.
Yeah, what's up?
I'd like to try something. My brother lived in North Tonawanda, so I've been representing. I live in Amherst.
Yeah.
What you propose here?
Yeah.
In Amherst.
Yeah. I mean, that moratorium that Tonawanda passed.
I got it.
I'm gonna actually like one of the things, I'm also pushing for is like.
Well, I'll be there. I'll be there at the meeting. Next meeting here in the town hall.
Yeah,
I'll be there. But I think we should. We should put that up hammer.
Yeah.
Well,
UP used to have like a small
I know that, like, right up there,
yeah, and like, with Tonawanda, it's like, because they're outside of like, so much, we could be so many more trained places in Tonawanda.
and why do you want American Axle?
Yeah.
Because there's a huge station at the mall, right next door.
Yeah.
I used to work for them. Well, I know where all the power, there's 4 lines coming in right there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's 115,000, 22,000 underground.
Yeah.
The power's there.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can develop power.
Yeah.
So is the city blocking it or?
The city didn't even know that was happening. Like the city of Buffalo didn't know that there was frequency mining happening at all until we brought it to them. Like no, it's like the city isn't doing anything. Like we gotta get like that's what I'm saying. We gotta get like start to like. Yeah. I just want to like wrap up. Yeah, like I got here like there is a mic system, but it didn't work, so yeah. I just gotta and I'm sorry, it's just like it's just technology. Yeah, we did what we could. Yeah, I just want to thanks everyone. I'm gonna close down the Zoom. I appreciate everybody coming. Yeah. What do we have here? Like, I just want to check on the questions we have here. Yeah, so I'll share that. Yeah, DeepSeek. Yeah, the reason like DeepSeek kind of crashed the thing is that it uses like a fraction of the power. Yeah. Okay. All right, folks. I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you for coming tonight.